If you're an artist with a finished comic book that you're looking to start promoting to your community of comic book making friends, stop. You may want to rethink how you're doing this. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. We also create comics. It is sort of a passion of mine to create comics, to talk about how to create comics, how to make a living creating comics. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because what happens, we've gone through all this, we've worked on our comic, we've created it, it's finished, now it's ready for us to start letting people know about it, to start promoting it. Well, what do? What's the first thing we do? We start telling all of our friends that are in our immediate comic book making community about it. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it's sort of short-sighted. I belong to this Facebook group, and there's many Facebook groups, and I'm not necessarily on Facebook all the time, so I don't know what's going on with it right now. But at the time when I signed up, it was, I was running a Kickstarter. It was like promote your own Kickstarter Facebook group where everyone can go on there and promote their own comic books, whatever they've got going on, and you can let people know about other independent creators, and that's great. We all need to support each other as independent creators, but you're very limited if you're just marketing to people just like you. Comic book creators, comic book fans, people that just love comics, so naturally they are going to purchase comics. That's not a bad market to go after. The thing is though, and we've talked about this before, how in the US, people have this stigma or this idea that comic books, even if people even know that they're still around, some people are just like, oh, what, they still make comics, even though there's movies and all this stuff based on comics. But a lot of what they're seeing out there is just that superhero genre comics. So the vast majority of people out there, when they think comics, they just think superheroes, like there's nothing else, at least here in the US. Other countries, in Europe, in Asian countries, it's a little different. I mean, they're a little more understanding about the vastness of the different varieties and genres that comic books can have. Not so much here in the States, but there is an entire untapped market of people that may buy your comic book if they just knew it existed, if it's something that they're passionate about. Maybe they don't care so much about superheroes, and maybe you've got something a little different that they want. So for those of us not doing superhero comics, or if you're doing a superhero comic book but it's got a little more of a twist, or it's a mash of a few different genres, take comic book buyers out of the equation. Look at your comic book and ask yourself, who is this book for? Are there people outside of the traditional channels that we usually market our comics, whether it's comic book conventions, in-store signings, that type of stuff, online to other comic book creators? Who out there is going to be interested in what we're creating? A really good example of this that I noticed when I was doing convention back when conventions were a thing, and they're coming back, don't worry. But there's a company called Flex Comics, and they don't necessarily, I don't think they actually produce comic books, but they produce, comic adjacent stuff, like a lot of it's like fan art and bootleg stuff, but it's all fitness based. So it'll be like Deadpool and he's lifting weights, but it's pool spelled P-U-L-L, and just stuff like that. All very, stuff that comic book creators can relate to, but it's all like workout stuff, and it's very much geared towards that audience. Now, I saw them at a comic book show, a convention, but they are making a lot more money. They're making money at the comic book store. So when I say this, I'm not saying ignore your kind of your traditional comic book creators, comic book collectors, things like that. Don't ignore them, but you got to go beyond that. So this company, Flex Comics, they do pretty well at comic book conventions, but where they really clean up is at like workout conventions, like trade shows, things that have to do with fitness and things like that, because they are the only ones selling that type of product there, where they're selling a sea of knockoffs, comic book adjacent, material fan art type stuff at a comic book convention. But when they go to a fitness stuff, people are selling, fitness equipment, they're selling their personal programs, all that stuff, but how many people are selling, this brand that's like for geeks, but also geeks that like to be in shape and stuff? And that may seem like a small amount if you're a geek like me. You don't see a lot of super, buff, healthy, physically fit people, not all the time, but they're out there. And that's what you got to do, is you got to niche down. The more you niche down, it's kind of funny, because when you think, oh, if who do I want to sell my comic to? Well, know, you want to say everyone. I want to sell my comic to everyone. So you think, well, the more people I can sell it to, the better. Yeah, but it doesn't always work that way, because once you get out there, the more you can niche down, the more you get those passionate people that really are interested, you know, on a deep level about the type of work that you're putting out there. And this is definitely a route that I had planned to go with, you know, pre-pandemic. I was kind of, even before the pandemic, I was kind of swearing off of traditional comic book conventions, because if you know anything about my brand, I do a lot of mad scientist type stuff. We are in the underground lair as we speak. So I've got, if you've ever been to my website, you'll know I've got all kinds of cool, geeky, mad scientist, you know, experiments. I've got, you know, my prints and everything. All that stuff is centered around that. So what I started noticing was when I went to a convention, you know, my comic books didn't sell that much because there was so much other stuff. But what I had was just, I had an interest, and I found out that most people that gravitated to what I were doing were like engineers and even a few rocket scientists or science teachers, things like that. Those are the people that really resonated with that. So for me, it made perfect sense. And sometimes those conventions, I mean, comic conventions in general aren't really that expensive to exhibit at compared to like a typical trade show booth. So a comic convention, you know, for a table, maybe, I don't know, maybe average $300 or something like that for a table. A booth at a trade show, those can be maybe a couple $1,000s. So a little different, but I think it's a little bit of a risk, but I think doing those type of shows, like a STEM show, you know, which is science, technology, art, and mathematics, that type of thing, or science, there's science teacher conventions, there's anything where you're going to get engineers, things like that. Those are the type of people that really gravitate to more of my mad scientist type stuff. So it would be a really wise decision for me to start doing shows like that. And I think because if I went in there, again, there's not going to be anyone selling that type of work to that audience. It's going to be brand new, so you're pretty much eliminating the competition. You don't got a bunch of other people selling comics, so you can go in there and sell your comics as long as it fits, and as long as the people that go to where, you know, go to where they are, find out what is unique about your book that people are going to be interested in, not just your typical comic book fan, and go to them, go to where they live, and then, you know, and give them something that they want, something that they didn't even know existed. A YouTube channel that does a tremendous job at this is Cartoonist Kayfabe. Now, if you're not familiar, you probably are familiar, but if you're not, it's hosted by Ed Piskor, Jim Rugg. They're two Eisner-winning comic book creators, and, you know, in addition to being amazing artists, they are brilliant marketers, and their channel speaks to that. The way that they built this channel and its kind of short-term rise, I mean, they've been doing it for I've been doing this channel for I don't know how long, but, you know, they just know exactly what they're doing. Sure, they're already established, you know, professional creatives in the indie comic scene. They do great work. They're well known, like I said, Eisner Award winning. But the way that they present, or the way they created this channel, it's a comic review channel, but they're also comic book creators who have built this amazing community where they go and they review comics, and at the top and end of every single show, they promote their own stuff. They're doing amazing things, but this whole channel was, I'm sure the impetus of it, not only to entertain, I mean, for us it's entertaining, we love the content, and they are really good at dissecting comic books, and they just have a wealth of knowledge, an incredible wealth of knowledge about comic books, specifically even like everything from indie comics to mainstream comics, all that. Super knowledgeable, super awesome artists, but they have created this community that entertaining us, but also, I mean, what we don't see behind the thing is this is just perpetuating their own stuff. I mean, they have just built this rabid fan base that are just going to go out and buy their comics, to the fact that, like, so this is Ed Piskor's latest comic. Now, I first became aware of him through Hip Hop Family Tree. I'm a big hip hop fan, especially back in the days, the era that he kind of covered in that series. But so this is a little different, and that's the other thing, is everything they do, it seems like each project they do is vastly different from the next, whereas Hip Hop Family Tree is very different from this new one, Red Room. Now, Red Room is, it's murder on the dark web for fun and profit. It is basically, if the dark web, if they were doing like webcams where, you know, this secret society of people are just pumping tons of money into these killers that are killing people live live on camera. It's very grim. Now, I'm a big horror fan. I'm not so much a fan of gore. I'm more atmospheric horror. So typically this might not even be something that I pick up, but I picked it up just because I'm such a fan of the creator. And he's built this repertoire with the audience and everything. So I just wanted to check this out and just read it for, the story. And, it is, like I said, it's super, super, super gory, super violent. But this ended up being like one of, I think Fantagraphics, one of their best-selling books. I don't know exactly how they quantify that. I would think that even Hip Hop Family Tree would have sold more just because it's been out longer, but as far as pre-sales, #1 issues, I think this is like their bestseller, and it's all because of the promotion that they've done through their channel with this. And going back to niching down, I mean, this is something that the average comic book collector, sure, they're going to pick this up, but somebody who's into horror, who may not even read comics, somebody who's into sort of this Fangoria gore type stuff, this is something that they can market at like a horror convention or anything like that. And that's what you need to think about. Don't just concentrate on the typical comic book collector. Go, if your book is a horror book, go find people that are into horror that don't even really read comics, and I guarantee you they're going to like something like this. The other example is Jim Rugg, the other host of Cartoonist Kayfabe. He came out with this, and this has the distinction of being the very first blacklight comic. When you look at this printing, it is just amazing. So if you have a book that is unlike any other book, this is a book that's going to cross over beyond typical comic book collectors. I mean, this could be sold at head shops, or it's based on Oktobriana, which is an underground Russian hero. And it's just this underground legend. So anyone that's into like history or anything like that, but you got to look at what your comic book is about and market to that. And this is, like I said, this is something that you don't have to be into comic books to enjoy, because it's something you don't see everywhere, and it's so original. So, and they do that with a lot of projects. I know at one time Jim Rugg was working on like a comic about running. I think he's a big runner, and I mean, I don't know much about running. I mean, I run every day, but I'm not like a runner. I mean, if you ever talk to a runner, I mean, everything is just running. I don't care about the shoes and all. I'm just kind of like Forrest Gump. I just run just to work out and stuff. But there are people that are super into running, and they are so passionate about running that they will definitely pick up a comic book, and I guarantee you many of them, it would be the only comic book they ever own, but because it's something they're passionate about, they're going to be interested. But if they don't know about it, they can't buy it. So you have to find where these people are, the people that are into the kind of book that you're doing, and get this book in front of them. And it's all about niching down. And I am guilty of not doing this with my own comic book, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure. It's in the vein of Goonies, Night of the Living Dead. It's very much in the spirit of the Goonies, Monster Squad, E.T., Flight of the Navigator, Stand By Me, that type of thing. So all these, there's a lot, anything you can think of that something that you might be inspired for, there's probably a convention based on it. I know there's been conventions based on, like even something as cult as like Monster Squad. So whatever that is, if it's something that those people would be interested in, that's probably a place I should go to promote this. And eventually when I collect everything, when the full series is done, I put it in a trade, I am really gonna hit the marketing, full bore and then go after all that stuff. But I do that on other areas. So for instance, I've been publishing coloring books through Amazon. So I've got this series of hipster dog coloring books. So this is what I'm talking about, niching down. So first of all, if you're gonna do a dog coloring book, dog is a big thing. There's so much competitions with other dog merchandise, even coloring books. There's tons of dog coloring books. So what I did was I combined two things. Funny hipster dogs, and then you can niche down even further from that into different breeds. So I've got pugs, I've got French bulldogs, I've got corgis. So I've got, and I've got more than that. These are the only ones I have on hand, but each one of those, and I found that, dog breed, I started with the pug and the corgi, because even people that don't own pugs and corgis, those just seem to be very memeable. They're the ones that people love to see pictures of, and but I was surprised that those two don't sell as good as some of the other just really specific breeds that I thought, well, I'll put that out there, but I don't know how many people are gonna, but some of them just, they sell like crazy. So So yeah, niching down, getting further in there and just diving deeper and deeper, you're gonna find these real passionate people. So if your comic book has something to do with something that no other comic book is doing, or something that is really specific to anything, especially if it's something you're passionate about yourself, because if you are, then you know you're right there where those people are. So don't forget to market to those people, that promote it out beyond just the typical comic book collector. And you can do this with pretty much any comic book that isn't your traditional, superhero story. And like I said, sometimes there may be something in that story that's a little beyond that. But for instance, my friend Gary Hodges, he created this DVS I always forget that part. It's Dinosaurs versus Mars Barks, 1997, and he's got a whole series of them. So this is actually the sequel. I forgot what the other date was on the other one. But anyway, this thing is like a cross between Quentin Tarantino and the X-Files. So any convention, people that are into like UFOs or conspiracy theories, things like that, because it's all very much about that. Dinosaurs, it crosses, there's so many different things involved with this book that there's a number of different routes that he could go with if he wanted to just go beyond just the typical comic book convention. Another one, my friend Gazbot, who does the horror A4, his stuff is very much kaiju generated or inspired by, and he is a big fan of kaijus and sentais and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, he'll go to Godzilla conventions and things like that, and if you can bridge that gap, because people there are going to look at Godzilla, so they may be like, I don't know what this new character is, this new kaiju, but if you can kind of make that connection, then that might be a route for you. But anything that's, like I said, not what people typically think for comic books. Another example from a friend of mine is Morning Star by Jeremy Burley. So this is a Western, but it's also a biblical tale. So it's Lucifer's fall from grace told as a Western. So there you go. Maybe Christian bookstores, maybe not. It's the same thing with my other friend Joshua Kimball, who has a story about faith and mental illness, whereas you think maybe a Christian bookstore might be interested in it, but it's got some language that they don't particularly want in their stores, and it's also a very real, very intense story. So there is a market for this. There are people out there that want this type of thing because it's so niche, because it's so unique. It's going to really resonate with the people, that if you can get it in front of the right people. So it's just a matter of finding those people. But something like, I don't know, he's doing stuff at like record shops and all kinds of different areas. Just people that are into kind of indie stuff, and it's also autobiographical. So people that are into that type of thing, and it really is just the craft that went into this. I mean, this is just an amazing book, all hand letter, everything. And it's just for people. This is a comic book creator's comic, and that may go a little outside of what we're talking about, because I'm talking about, no, don't just concentrate on comic book, creators, but for people that really love the craft of it, it's entrenched in this particular book. But you can do this with almost any book out there. And so think about your book. Think about what's unique about it. Or if you're creating a project, maybe work that into your story. I mean, do what you want. I mean, you don't want to just like, oh, I'm doing this because it's going to be marketable. But if there's something in there that you can market to, an audience that you can market to, why not do that? So yeah, just some food for thought. I really want to kind of stretch our idea of what the comic book market is, or who we can sell our comics to, or who's going to be interested, because like I said, there are people out there that would love our comic if they only knew it existed. So let me know what you think about this. Let me know what comic you're creating. What are some areas, some demographics that that maybe you haven't tapped yet, that you think might be interested in it, and make a plan. But let me know in the comment section. I definitely try to get back to everyone eventually, and I will see you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.